Well, hello and good morning, church. Pastor Kyle here. We're going to continue on in the daily word today in Luke 23. And I happened to notice a little typo in the 2020 reading plan going from yesterday in Luke 22. It skips over to Luke 23, verse 27. And that's just not right. We don't want to skip over some reading here. So what we're going to do today and tomorrow is I'm going to do the first half of Luke 23, and we'll finish the second half of Luke 23 tomorrow. So we'll be from verse 1 to verse 25 today. So if you want to follow along in verse 1 to verse 25, what we're seeing here is the continuation of this kind of illegal trial of Jesus. And what's going on is the chief priests and the scribes are looking for ways to find Jesus guilty. They're really looking for anything they can, and they're dragging him before different jurisdictions, and nobody wants to make a decision. Nobody wants to deal with it. That's why we see Jesus before Herod or Pilate, and then he sends Jesus to Herod because he finds out Jesus is a Galilean, and then Herod sends him right back. But some interesting things are going on in here because they brought, in verse 1, the chiefs, priests and the scribes and everybody, the Sanhedrin, brought Jesus before Pilate. And they began to accuse him. We found this guy, he's misleading our nation, and he's forbidding people to pay taxes. This is a blatant lie. This is not truth. They're just trying to make up a story at this point, something that they think Pilate, who is a Roman magistrate, would want to hear. Well, of course, Roman magistrates would want people to pay taxes, so maybe he'll get really mad at that. So Pilate asks him, and they say, well, he keeps calling himself the King of the Jews. Isn't that rude to Caesar? So Pilate says, are you King of the Jews? No, probably a little tongue in cheek. So are you King of the Jews now? And Jesus says, it is as you say. And Pilate says to these guys, listen, I don't find any guilt in this man. He can say he's king if he wants. It's not, he's not leading anyone. It doesn't matter. He's not fomenting resurrection. That's all I really, or insurrection. That's all I care about. He will resurrection later. But Pilate, when he hears it, he says, where are you from? I'm from Galilee. Oh, great. Herod is in charge of Galilee. Take him to him. Well, Herod was in Jerusalem at the time. So the crowd and the chief priests and everybody brought him before Herod. And Herod looks at him, and he's been wanting to meet Jesus a long time because he knows he's a miracle worker, claims all this stuff. Well, Jesus doesn't have any time for Herod at this point. He's not going to speak to him. He's not going to answer for himself. He's just going to humbly stand there and let what is happening happen to him. So they're accusing him vehemently. Herod's making fun of him. Herod throws a big purple robe on him and says, oh, you're king. You want to be king of the Jews. And in case you've forgotten, Herod, the line of Herods are a vassal king, basically a regional king that was put in charge by the Roman Empire. So that they were from a region. They were known as the Idumean kings. They were foreigners who were brought in to be kings over the Jews. And so they were an illegitimate kingship, but in the eyes of the Roman Empire, they were the rulers here. And so Jesus isn't even going to answer him. He doesn't recognize his authority, but he does just, take what's going on. And then so when Herod sends him back, he's like, okay, just go. Pilate and him had been conspiring on some things. They've become friends. He sends him back to Pilate. And Pilate summons the chief priests and the rulers and says, you brought this man to me once before. You said he incites the people to rebellion. I've examined him. I found no guilt. What do you want? And they all cry, away with this man. Give us Barabbas. And we know from the other Gospels what that means is every year during this festival, they would release a prisoner or some prisoners that were demanded by the people. And Barabbas was a murderer. He was kind of a crazy guy. And they say, no, give us this guy instead and throw Jesus. In fact, kill Jesus. Pilate doesn't want to do this, but I guess I don't have a choice. So he releases Barabbas. He doesn't want to cause an insurrection here. And he sees the crowd getting crazier and crazier. So he says they were insistent with loud voices. They began to prevail. So Pilate pronounces the sentence they demanded, and he granted it to them. And he released the man they were asking for, who had been thrown in prison for insurrection and murder, oddly enough, right? They're claiming Jesus was the insurrectionist, but Barabbas really was. and then he delivered Jesus over to their will. So again, along with that illegal trial that we see going on, we see this kind of these false claims thrown at Jesus. The whole time, Jesus isn't defending himself because he is submitting to the will of the Father, willingly going to the cross, as the Old Testament says, like a lamb to the slaughter, innocent, silent before his shears, and going on our behalf. So as we look at the daily word tomorrow, we'll be getting into the rest of 23, where we look at the actual crucifixion. So heavy stuff, but really good for our instruction and for knowing that Jesus just loved his church so much, the people that he would redeem so much, that he would go through all of this and endure the eternal wrath of God on our behalf. So hopefully that daily word was encouraging to you. We'll see you tomorrow.